You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, I feel like a bad day for Rudy Giuliani is a good day for America. He just tried something in court that kind of backfired in his face. So can you talk about what just happened to Rudy Giuliani?
Brian, Rudy Giuliani brought suit against Joe Biden and a number of other folks who were involved in the debate that Joe Biden gave. And he claimed Joe Biden defamed him and invaded his privacy by saying certain things about him during the debate. Now, when have we ever known Rudy Giuliani to file frivolous lawsuits? Not
our Rudy.
No, and here is what just happened. And this is kind of beyond embarrassing for somebody who at least purports to be a lawyer, or at least used to be a working lawyer. Rudy Giuliani, in a one-page ruling, here's what the federal court judge up in New Hampshire, which is where Rudy filed the suit, here's what he said. He said, the defendants, meaning Joe Biden and the other entities Rudy tried to sue for defamation as a result of the debate, the defendants have filed a motion to dismiss the complaint, contending, among other things, that the complaint must be dismissed for lack of personal jurisdiction. And get ready for it. Giuliani has failed to object to the motion. So he brought the suit. The defendant said, you don't have jurisdiction over us in New Hampshire. And Rudy didn't even bother responding to that motion objecting to personal jurisdiction. So the judge goes on to note, Giuliani has utterly failed to carry his burden to prove that there was personal jurisdiction over the person and entities he sued. So in about one page, the judge just kind of figuratively balled up Rudy Giuliani's lawsuit against Joe Biden and threw it in the trash can.
Okay, I have a lot of questions here, but the first one is, given what the Supreme Court has said about presidential immunity, the notion that Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump's own quasi-lawyer, quasi-advisor, would try to sue him for something that he said during an official act, a presidential debate, doesn't that seem completely destined for failure anyway, given what the Supreme Court has done in Trump's behalf?
Brian, it's a great point. And the distinguishing feature here is that the Supreme Court ruled that a president is immune from criminal prosecution for official acts or core constitutional functions. But this would be a civil suit. But remember, years ago, the Supreme Court had ruled that presidents enjoy a healthy dose of immunity against civil suits as long as they were acting within the scope of their official duties, even if those official duties were sort of dwelling at the outer perimeter of what a president should do. So, this really goes back to the older Supreme Court precedent that says, well, when civil suits are brought against presidents or federal government officials, they're going to have a healthy dose of immunity as long as they were performing official presidential functions.
Okay, Glenn, Rudy Giuliani is enmeshed in some deep and severe legal troubles and financial troubles himself. Doesn't it cost money to bring a lawsuit forward?
Yeah, it's a great question, because when you bring a lawsuit and then you completely fail to follow up on the necessary next steps in your own lawsuit, it seems like Rudy Giuliani should just take that money and set it on fire. Because ordinarily, when you bring a civil suit, there are really two ways to go about it as the person who wants to file the suit. First of all, it doesn't cost much to file a lawsuit, a fairly low expense endeavor. However, if you're going to be represented by counsel, and most people are, one, you've got to pay your attorney up front, a retainer fee. And then what happens is, as the attorney begins to work on the case, he or she will bill against that retainer fee. So ordinarily there is an upfront cost, unless you can convince the lawyer you want to hire that your case is so strong on the evidence, a surefire winner in court. Maybe the lawyer would be willing to take it on a contingency fee basis and say, you don't have to pay me anything. I'm feeling so good about your prospects of winning in court that I will simply take 1/3 of the monetary amount that you are awarded after we win this case. Well, Rudy's track record, when you look at all of the cases that he filed challenging the results of the 2020 election, and every last one was rejected, was dismissed. Rudy went down in flames, and he ultimately had to admit that, quote, we have a lot of theories, but we don't have a lot of evidence. That was Rudy. You know, why in the world any attorney, self-respecting attorney who intends to earn a couple of bucks off of representing Giuliani would take it on a contingency basis is beyond me.
Glenn, are you saying that Rudy Giuliani filing a civil suit against the sitting president of the United States for something he said during a presidential debate isn't a surefire victory and wouldn't warrant an attorney representing him on contingency?
Go figure. You know, Rudy Giuliani's legal acumen and skills and judgment have seemed so sound up to this point. That's how he ended up being criminally indicted in multiple jurisdictions.
Can he practice law right now? What's the status of Rudy Giuliani's ability to actually continue being a lawyer?
I believe when you look at the two jurisdictions that have proceeded on Rudy Giuliani for ethical violations, New York and Washington, D.C., he was a member of the New York State Bar and the D.C. Bar. I believe he's been permanently disbarred in one, and I think that was New York, and I think he's pending permanent disbarment in D.C., and I think he is temporarily suspended from practicing law. I don't know if he has a third law license out there. Some people do join, multiple state bars, but the two that I know of, I believe Rudy Giuliani is prohibited in both from practicing law himself.
Glenn, when you have someone like Rudy Giuliani, who is right now facing prosecution in a number of different jurisdictions, and he's continuing to bring forward frivolous cases like this, overtly frivolous cases like this, does this have any impact on how the judges perceive him in his other prosecutions, that he continues to abuse the legal system?
You have to wonder. Judges are human beings, and when they are contending with a case in which Rudy Giuliani is an indicted defendant, I would think it might be hard for them to divorce from their sort of sphere of knowledge the fact that Rudy Giuliani not only filed a frivolous case in a federal court recently, but then he refused to even do the follow-up work that his own suit required. I mean, I don't think it will have a direct impact, but atmospherically, I think the more Rudy falls down on even the basics as a lawyer and a litigant, it can't help but kind of be part of what judges are thinking about when they're listening to arguments being proposed by Rudy Giuliani or his lawyers.
I mean, is that something that is taken into account, the destroyed credibility of a defendant by virtue of what they're doing to themselves in other cases? I mean, I know that the judges have to take these cases unto themselves, completely divorced of what's happening on the outside, but does that factor in at all when you do have someone who has so destroyed their own credibility?
Yeah, when you talk about destroyed credibility, that can come into play directly in criminal cases. How? If the defendant ever chooses to take the stand. Because then it will be up to the judge in the case how much of this is appropriate cross-examination fodder. Missing a filing deadline may not be, but certainly many of Rudy Giuliani's proven lies against, for example, the Georgia state election workers, Shea Moss and Ruby Freeman, who won, I think, $146 million judgment against Rudy for his, hardcore, long-term, unapologetic defamation lies that he told about those women. That could very well, as part of the question of his credibility, should he take the stand, that kind of stuff may very well become the stuff of cross-examination.
Well, Glenn, I was actually thinking about it because at first glance, this looks like such an overtly frivolous lawsuit that what's the point of even bringing it forward? But you had mentioned that he owes $146 million. That's a hole that he will never, so long as he lives, be able to crawl out of. Do you think that these wild swings are just efforts for him to try to reclaim money wherever he can in an effort to try to make himself whole on the money that he already owes in other cases?
It's really tough to say what would motivate Rudy Giuliani to, one, file what seems to be a frivolous suit claiming the president lied about him in a presidential debate, and then two, fail to do even the minimal necessary follow-up in your own lawsuit that you filed. Is it money? Is it to have a talking point for whatever reason, that I'm suing President Biden for lying about me. You know, getting into the mind of Rudy Giuliani and figuring out what makes him tick is probably not a challenge I'm up to or interested in.
Fair enough. We will leave it there. Again, for anything that happens on the Rudy Giuliani saga as it continues to descend into whatever rabbit hole Rudy brings us in, we'll make sure to follow along with it. For those watching right now, if you want to support our work and follow along with all of these prosecutions, whether it's Giuliani or Trump himself, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.